here we are. We got given no brief at all to do a podcast for LGBT History Month, and our job now is to make the person who commissioned us to do this really, really, really regret ever asking Oscar and Emily to do a podcast without a clear brief, because we're just going to go where this takes us. So, good morning, Oscar. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. I'm really looking forward to what I imagine is going to be an absolute whirlwind of a conversation, which is going to take us across the world, across history, and probably make the marketing team regret ever asking us to do this.
Well, I hadn't planned that, but now you've said it, I'll recalibrate what I was thinking, and we'll go in that direction. In fact, in true form, and those people who know me, I literally at about 11:30 last night scribbled some stuff in my notebook for today. And the great part is, because I scribbled it late at night, my handwriting is dreadful. I might even have trouble reading what I wrote down last night. So who knows where we'll go. First contestant, Oscar, tell us your name and where'd you come from?
Hello. Yeah, would you believe it? My name is Oscar. They them pronouns, Chief Executive Officer at Blossom LGBT, and of course Director at Trans in the City. And right now I'm in a very suggy Surrey. How about you,
Ah,
host?
I'm Emily Hamilton. I'm in my day job, I'm Vice President of FTSE 100 Business, and in one of my gay jobs, I am an Executive Director at Trans in the City. Notable bon vivant, and yeah, really ill-prepared host for these sorts of things. So lovely to have you here. I am really fighting the urge to say Oscar as we go through, and I haven't fought the urge. I've just done it. So let's talk about LGBT History Month. So we're really coming towards the end of LGBT History Month now. You've already told me that you're absolutely knackered from overcommitting yourself, as always, Oscar.
Always.
And there's a lesson out there, kids: don't overcommit yourself when you're doing activism work. To that path lies ruin. So tell me a little bit about why LGBT History Month, or history in general. Why is it important to you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's always been something of real personal interest, and I think that it probably links very closely, and I'm already in pompous territory here, but with my personal ethics, and something that I'm so keen on is doing lots of work around race equity, justice, and I think LGBT History Month presents such a fantastic opportunity for us to kind of remove a lot of the myths, which is queer history is white gay men doing white gay men thing, because we know that it's really not. And
Yeah.
I think for me that's why I've really engaged in it this year. As well as I just love any opportunity to get into some dusty archives and sort of throw throw around some folders.
We came here for history. We're coming away with knowledge of Oscar's kinks, which wasn't on my bingo card. So folks, if you're looking to woo Oscar, Dusty Archives is the place to try and do it.
But you have a real interest in history as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, history was my best subject at school. I liked learning about it, and I kind of didn't know why. I mean, it wasn't that the teacher was particularly special or anything like that, and I think it's just something I saw. And I was in Washington a few years ago, Washington DC, and I was walking past the National Archives, and outside the National Archives they got some sculptures on the pediments, and there's quite a lot of very wise words written on sculptures in Washington, which I wish some of their politicians would read a little bit more often. And there's an inscription on one of them that says, "What's past is prologue," which actually comes from Shakespeare's The Tempest. And actually, that's probably what it's all about. If you want to know what's going on today, you've got to understand what came before, because that is the prologue to today. And there is a danger. And you said, you're going to be really pompous, and then you weren't really pompous, and then I started being really pompous. And one of the things I do worry about with LGBT History Month is the sort of earnestness and some of the pomposity of some of the things I've seen, over the last few years. This sort of people, yes, well, you didn't know about this person in history, and you must know about this person. If you don't know about this person in history, then who are you? What is wrong with you? You must make more effort. and I think there's a real danger that we turn history into something which turned so many people off it when they were kids,
Hmm. Hmm.
because it doesn't have any sort of resonance to where they are today. And history, I think historically, there's a bit of tautology there. I
Back in
think
my day.
I went back in my well, yeah, my day was longer further back than your day, I'm afraid to say. But back in my day, before my day, let's say before my day,
There was one.
before my day, Hoyle. Look, we're not starting this. The trans elders aren't on this call. I'm not a trans elder yet. But before history started to be taken a little less seriously, it was seen as just dates. It was dates. It
Hmm.
was, you were good at history if you could say, "Oh, in 1066, the Norman invasion took over England, and Harold got shot in the eye," and all that, and that is just so uninteresting. And I think there's just so much richness in our queer history that just doesn't get talked about. And yeah, I think having an LGBT History Month is crucial. I think having an LGBT History Month which talks about all of our stories, and you said it just then, white cis gay men's history is so important, but it isn't
Yep.
the whole story. It's a
Hmm.
chapter in a bigger book, and I think talking about all of our experiences is really crucial. So I know a little bird. Well, it's not a little bird anymore. It's like a big black X and all that sort of rubbish. But anyway, someone told me that you, Oscar, have been traveling to the ancient world, and that
Yeah.
that you have taken a big interest in our ancestors who wore bed sheets to walk the streets. So to tell us more about what is it about ancients that you found interesting and has drawn your attention?
Yeah, so I think that there's a couple of reasons why I found the ancient history so interesting. I think the first of which is that it's actually relatively unapologetic. Um, you know, we see this trend essentially through colonial acts, so the Buggery Act and gross. Oh gosh, my words aren't coming out. Gross indecency acts, things like that have put this element of shame over queerness throughout, more of modern history, whereas there wasn't that. And actually, when you look post colonialism and all the way back to actually as far as we can currently get with research, actually queerness is celebrated and people are so open about it. So, if you go back to Mesopotamia, they worshipped a trans god or goddess, Inanna, who was also
Called
known as
Emily.
yeah, yeah. um, Inanna, also known as Ishtar, was two different gods that merged in Mesopotamian culture, and they actually had a cult following, to the
Like
point where
Emily.
they're funnily enough, yeah, people worship outside your house still, don't they?
Oh yeah, it's too early.
Uh, but I love that. I love the fact that it's unapologetic and that
Yeah.
it's celebrated, because that's how I feel queer identity should be, because I'm personally so incredibly proud. And that is one element that really drew me to ancient history. The other one is just the fantastical stories that come along with it. So ancient Greeks blame the creation of trans people on alcoholism. And I know that trans people love a drink, right? But um, but the proverbs go that basically trans people were made because of God, who was creating body parts and kind of stockpiling. So like, two boobs, five arms, throwing them all in pots, as you do, as we all do. And then he went out and had way too much to drink and came back and put boobs on a man's body. Um, to which, a very elementary version of what our understanding of transgenders people are today. But what an interesting story. I think that's such a fantastic origin. Maybe not, maybe a little bit offensive, but of course actually so interesting that, you're before common era, but you still have these ideologies of how trans people were created. I
Yeah.
find it just fascinating.
Maybe I should start drinking again.
You might start creating people if
Do,
you
do
do,
you want?
so
Do you
be
want?
careful.
Well. Now we've established I'm a goddess with a cult following. Do you want to hear an ancient joke? Do you want to hear an ancient joke?
Yes.
So you know they had dry cleaning in ancient Greece. You know that it was invented in ancient Greece, the dry cleaning process.
Hmm.
It wasn't, but anyway, it works for the joke. So ancient Greek man walks into the dry cleaners and he sees the guy behind the desk and he says, "Euripides?" And the guy behind the desk takes the garment off him and it says, "Eumenides."
Oh, babes.
Oh, come on. That was a good one. That was a good one.
It
Well, anyway,
was.
look, you know, you're a hard audience. Yeah, I mean, I love the fact that you've sort of really dived into the ancients, and you know, if you want dust, that's the place to go. You know,
Oh yeah.
your dust kink must have been absolutely satisfied with having a rummage through the ancient world. Did you find the material was rich enough for you? Because one of my concerns about ancient history is certainly my experience is that a lot of the ancient histories were written a long time ago. They are historical in and of themselves.
Hmm.
Did you find that there was enough of a perspective on queer ancient history, or was it seen through that lens of, you know, you talked about the Buggery Act. So what year Buggery Act? 15?
Oh God, 15. It's either 1550s or 1560s, but
Yeah,
my brain is.
1556 from memory, but I reserve the right to edit myself to show that I knew everything. But I think a lot of history, you know, that was sort of, you know, as we go through the Renaissance and we start to hear more about the ancient world, lots of things were seen through that prism
Mhm.
of that world. So the disapproval, the oh my goodness, look at these terrible ancients and their lascivious behavior. Were you able to find decent histories that actually explored that in a way that was more sensible?
It took a very, very long time, and to be honest with you, to be able to find those histories, I had to take it out of the archives and onto the internet, which we always know, the second you get onto the internet, you have to question absolutely everything that
Yeah.
you read. Um, but I think I think the nicer part is that the internet brings back an intergenerational storytelling that we lost through things like the AIDS epidemic and criminalisation.
Mm.
That actually now people do go out and really spend a lot of time finding this research. And you know, just yesterday, I was talking with an academic, a fantastic researcher at the University of Surrey called Teresa Pilgrim, who is looking into the history of medieval texts and queer women and
Mm.
transness. And a lot of it now is having to make our best assumptions because the contextual parts of the writing were lost because of criminalization. So
Yeah.
it's incredibly difficult to find and say things with 100% accuracy. And it's a very difficult line to be treading because, as you know, with queer activism, you're constantly having to defend that
Yeah.
things are the truth. Whereas when we look at history, you can't. There is no 100% knowing for almost all of history. Things like I talked about a pharaoh from ancient Egypt who was buried with all of the decorations in the tomb of a male, but throughout history has been remembered as a female because of
Mm.
what they found inside the mummification chamber. Well, you know, I don't know what we're going to say about that. My assumption there is we're looking at a trans person, but we don't know. Um, and because at the time of the discoveries of this ancient history,
Mm.
there definitely wasn't, you know, let's just check if they're LGBT.
Yeah, well, you're right. I mean, and I guess that's something for me that, you know, I end up screaming. You know, if you watch the popular history or archaeology shows, I'm screaming. I remember, I think it was a Time Team episode where they unearthed a grave,
Mm,
and it had stereotypically female grave goods.
yeah.
And I remember they sort of went off to the tent, and you know, Tony Robinson beetled off to the tent and did his usual wafting his arms about thing. And I remember the person saying, "Well, this is very puzzling to us. You know, we found the skeleton and the remains we found, and we, you know, measured the femur, and yeah, but they were buried with female grave goods, and this is really puzzling to us." I'm sat there, I'm screaming. It's not puzzling at all.
No, no, it's
Now,
really not.
now you're right. We apply a sense of something, but Occam's razor says that the simplest explanation is usually the right one. If you have somebody who is buried and therefore was recognized, and this is about gender, gender is
Hmm.
your social construct,
Yeah.
buried with female grave goods, there are, I guess, two possibilities. Either they just really liked those things, and they were just also fabulously stylish, and
An
knew how
icon.
to knew how to put a face on in the morning, or they were what we would describe as trans. But there is a real reluctance among some historians, and egged on, I think, by a pretty hostile media, to deny anything. So uh, Elagabalus is a great example. So the recent row about Elagabalus,
Hmm.
Roman emperor, um, we have writings, we have contemporaneous writings about Elagabalus, who asked to be called My Lady, who said they would give all of the gold in the kingdom for the surgeon that could give them a vagina. And a museum quite rightly posits this and says this is interesting. This we would probably consider this to be a trans person. And the outcry, oh no, you can't put your lens on them. They
Yeah.
might have meant something else when they said, "I'll give all my gold for a vagina," or call me my lady. They might have had some other purpose, and you want to scream at these people and say, "What is wrong with you?" Again, Occam's razor. Look at the simpler of the explanations, and you see it across our whole spectrum. So, you'll see depictions in ancient art of lovers on vases, or in carvings, or in reliefs, and you'll see the caption. You go to the museum, you see the caption say, two friends reclining together. Nobody knows what they are doing. And and you look at it as a queer person, you say, I know what they're doing. I recognize what they're up to.
Hmm.
But this reluctance almost and I think it's about labeling. It's like, oh, we don't want to label them as queer, or gay, or trans, as if that's something shameful, as
Yeah.
if there's some shame attached to that. And I think that's troubling for me in our interpretation of history. Um, what's your favorite? What's the favorite? You've given a few examples. What's your favorite fact? Because history is sort of about facts and the interpretation of them. The favorite fact you have discovered recently in your trips to the dusty dungeon of pleasure and history.
Oh, actually, I was going to make a joke that totally wasn't podcast appropriate, so we're going to skip straight over that.
That'll be
Um,
available for subscribers in
yeah,
the
that's on the
um
Patreon.
yeah, in the Patreon page. Yeah.
Do you know, actually, I think my favorite is from way more modern. So even though ancient history is by far my favorite, um, but it's to do with, maybe not necessarily a fact, but I was running a workshop recently on the history of modern day protest. And what I found hilarious is how you can pretty much very easily pinpoint modern day pop culture through the history of protest signs. So you look at queer protest from almost day one, and the art style of the day, the feelings have all been incorporated into these protest signs. So, during the Great Depression, the signs were a lot less colorful, more text focused, all the way through to like the 2010s, where internet culture is becoming really more obvious, and you're seeing people like Bert and Ernie appearing on protest signs across the countries. And I think, actually, whilst that takes us out of
Hubert.
ancient history, yeah, I just think I just think that's really cool, that how, when we look back at the history of our sort of progress as a community, that we see a real clear interlinking with modern pop culture, and how I
Mm.
think queer identity, trans people, LGBT people have always very heavily influenced modern day media. So I think it's a really nice, almost intersection of the two to be able to look at. But I'd love to hear yours, because I know that we have very different versions of what sort of things we look into?
Yeah, so I'm much more of a modern historian, and I found out many years ago. So I was applying for universities in the 90s, and I had a mad notion then that I might go to Oxford. Um, and I'll tell you this now, completely based on the fact I was obsessed with Inspector Morse. I loved Inspector Morse. I thought, I'll go to Oxford. That'd be a good place to be. I'll get in a Jaguar and cruise about. And I was at a really rubbish tertiary college. Actually, same tertiary college Bobby went to, of all places. So there must have been something in the water there.
I was gonna say they're turning the turning the frogs gay.
Oh, that's it. It'd be interesting. Let's do a survey there. But anyway, I went to this tertiary college and I actually spent a couple of years effectively bunking off in HMV, listening to CDs on the old CD stand with the big sweaty, slightly grubby headphones. That actually fills me with horror now. And I decided I'd go for having not really attended classes. I've been seen as a bit of a waste of everyone's time, which actually, to be fair, I probably was. But I thought, no, I'll sit the Oxford entrance exam. Back in those days, you sort of sat the exam, and if you passed the exam, you could sack off your A levels effectively because it was an unconditional offer.
Oh,
And I
wow.
thought this would be a great ticket, out of actually having to put any effort into my A levels. And I remember saying, I was, and history was going to be my subject, modern history, and I sort of put my hand up, said, oh, I'm going for the entrance exam. There was another guy in my class who said, oh, I'm doing the entrance exam, next Wednesday, and he said, oh, good luck, because my tutor was an Oxford man himself, who quite often I used to see in one of the local pubs for quite a long time. So I think there's a correlation between being an Oxford man and working in a really awful tertiary college, and the pub. Anyway, he walked around and he sort of squatted down in front of me and said, "Dead name, don't do it. You'll be crucified."
Oh, wow.
Great bit of historical information
Encouragement
there as
there.
well. Yeah. And anyway, so I sat the exam and I just did it on things that interested me, sort of around First World War period and there. And I passed the entrance exam with top marks across the piece and got invited for an interview. So I went up to Oxford for an interview. This is really completely not what we're here to talk about, but it's a funny story. I went up to Oxford with my friend who also passed, and you get invited up for a few days before Christmas to do your interviews. And we turned up, the pair of us, in trench coats from London, like some sort of latter day Cray wannabe intellectuals, wandered about, got absolutely hammered in all of the college bars, spilled chili sauce all down my trench coat from the kebab van on the Turl. And before my interview, I thought the best possible preparation for that was to go and have a few double brandies in the Mitre.
Oh,
And I wandered in and we started the interview. And you're probably going to see a bit of a parallel here. I was very ill prepared, walked in, they asked me a question. I started brilliantly and it just tailed off and it just went really, really wrong. And I didn't get in, and actually, probably that was a good thing. I went to, in my view, what was a much better college, better course. But they called it modern history, but their idea of modern history started, in the sort of 1400s. And it's like modern history for me is the 20th century to now, and that's what really resonates with me because I think I can see the connection. It's within living memory. I'm fascinated with old people, which is obviously why Bobby and I get on really well. But to be able to talk to and touch people who've lived through great events and be able to take their perspectives, I find that fascinating. My great grandmother, I met her. She was born in the Victorian era. I was too young really to have a decent conversation. Also, she hated me. But to be able to touch somebody, and in her case, who had lived through the last years of Victoria's reign, the Irish War of Independence, the Irish Civil War, to have lost a husband, as a result of the First World War, a husband who fought for the British at Gallipoli, but came back and did things for the IRA, to be able to see and touch that history for me is really, really exciting. And from a queer history perspective, we have seen all of those strides over the last 100 years, and a big thing that really got me interested in our history was reading about the 1967 decriminalisation. So
okay.
we talk a lot about the 67 Act and the Wolfenden Report, which came before it, and anyone who really wants, because they're not into the Oscar Hoyle dusty fetish scene. Anyone who wants to understand, the environment, actually, there's a great film called Victim that I recommend every queer person watches. It was the first real mainstream film to deal with queer issues. It's Dirk Bogarde, great cast. But people say 67 decriminalisation. Yeah, it's the permissive society. Everything was great. It was not like that at all. If you read the proceedings that led us to the 67 report, you'll see massive parallels with what we have today. The past is prologue. There was pity. There was a sense that it wasn't that people thought being gay was okay. What they thought was, well, we probably shouldn't criminalize it. We probably shouldn't be putting people in prison for this, except we will put some people in prison because we'll leave a few bits in which you can still prosecute people for, all the way up till the 1980s, actually, in some parts of the UK. And I think for me, the understanding of it's not just, anyone can say 1967, homosexuality decriminalized. Way. It's not about that. It's about saying, actually, what was the debate? Who was involved? What were people saying? What were their intentions? What was their purpose? And that goes right up to the present day. The arguments we're now having about the Equality Act and people's interpretation. Oh, the Equality Act. No, it never said trans people could do this. Well, actually, we know it did because we've got the history. We can go into the Hansard. We can go into how that was come about. And I think for me, that's where history really comes alive, is understanding what the thinking was about the events and the facts that happened, so that you're in a better place to defend them.
Yeah.
Or knock them down and say, no, that's not correct. And actually, let's have reality. Let's have truth about what we're doing. And what was it Indiana Jones said? We're dealing with fact, not truth. If you want truth, the philosophy class is down the corridor. Well, I think fact and truth are really important. And actually, the truth comes from understanding all of the perspectives and seeing the outcomes.
On the topic of decriminalisation, there is a fascinating research project going on at the moment, also at the University of Surrey, by a researcher called Kat Hubbard, looking at the history of aversion therapy. So, and she presented this incredibly interesting presentation for about 10 minutes on how aversion therapy changed at the point of decriminalisation. So actually, it wasn't that all of a sudden it was completely fine to be LGBT, go ahead and go out and multiply as such, although maybe bad choice of words there. But then moved on to actually, there are records of queer people who didn't want to be LGBTQ plus, and would check themselves in to aversion therapy, and actually therapy remained incredibly hostile for a point of history where it continued to offer aversion therapy and moved into actually pity. So they pitied LGBTQ plus people because of the choice of lifestyle, all the way through to modern day where we're at today. But also, Kat is making a conscious point to make it really clear that actually aversion therapy happened to trans people, it happened to LGBT women, amongst everybody else, and it's just a fascinating research piece that I think when it's published, if anyone can check it out, I would 100% agree to. I feel like I should say that I'm not sponsored by the University of Surrey.
Well, I wasn't going to make the point, but you're a Surrey person, so
yeah.
This is where I start singing "Who's Surrey Now," and anyway, no, I won't do that.
Sorry, not Surrey.
Sorry, not Surrey. I'm recognizing we did get a bit of a brief on time, and we're sort of galloping ahead. So I thought I would throw a bit of a curveball in just to sort of close us off. So when the pandemic hit, I tried to keep our queer community at work together because we weren't able to meet up or talk to each other. I used to run a quiz night, and I wrote over 100 quizzes during that period, which took me hours and hours and hours, but I loved doing it. And the intention with them was that nobody would know the answers, but it would be fun, because it's much more fun for me if you don't have some sort of brain box who knows all the answers every week. As I got 40 out of 40. I want people not to know, because actually I want them to learn. I want them to be sparked a bit of interest. Or, lots of people said, I thought that was really interesting. So there was an LGBT round. So I printed off.
Great.
And for people who aren't watching, I'm rustling my papers. I printed off some questions. So I'm going to fire some questions at you. So are you ready? You ready for some questions?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they're sort of history based. Okay, but they're queer. By what name is Finnish illustrator Tuukko Lakus? Hang on, Laaksonen. It's only because I can't see. I haven't got my glasses on. Tuukko Laaksonen, better known as.
I couldn't tell you. I don't have the foggiest.
It's Tom of Finland.
Ah.
Tom of Finland. Okay. Which gay poet was author of the poem Anthem for Doomed Youth?
Oh my goodness. Shakespeare.
Oh, okay. It's Wilfred Owen.
This isn't going very well for me.
Only 480 years out. That's fine. It's okay. You were close. Which gay artist said that everyone will be famous for 15 minutes?
I'm feeling really quite silly. Um,
That's the intention.
Boy George.
No, Andy Warhol. Andy Warhol. Okay. What is the common name for the third gender community in India and Pakistan?
Oh, the Hijra.
The Hijra. Absolutely.
Fascinating. On record since the Kama Sutra. Well, actually before, but it's featured in the Kama Sutra.
Exactly, and a lot of the persecution obviously came from the colonial influence of the British East India Company and the British Empire afterwards. Okay, here's a pop culture one for you. Which
Ooh.
British gay actor was the fourth to play Q in the James Bond movies?
Oh, I'm going to upset so many people. I've never watched James Bond. So
Speechless.
do you know what? I can't even think of a single gay actor now.
Ben Whishaw. Ben
Russell
Whishaw.
T Davies.
Ben Whishaw. Ben Whishaw is the answer. Okay. What colour carnation was worn by gay men in Victorian times in their buttonhole to signify their sexuality?
Pink or red?
Green.
Ah.
Oscar Wilde wore a green carnation. Oscar Wilde.
Yes.
Oscar.
Do you know, I spent my entire life being compared to him. I really should have known that.
Well, yes, and I'm going to send you a green carnation in the post. What symbol did the Nazis use to identify gay and transgender prisoners?
It was a pink triangle,
Yes.
which was later adopted by civil rights activists, and even later was tattooed onto my elbow. Right? No, that's not my elbow. That's my shoulder. Right.
It's not your elbow. That tattoo. Yes, absolutely. Reappropriated and a reminder of where persecution can lead us to. Okay, what is the name for the non-binary community in Samoa?
Ooh. Is it Bisu?
It's the Fa'afafine.
Who am I thinking of that uses the Bisu then?
It could. There are a lot. Again, a great example of lots and lots of gender non-conforming communities across the Pacific Islands, and suppressed by empire. So yeah, I'm not sure where those.
Oh.
See, this is the point. We're learning together.
I do remember that the Bisu was a sub-community in Indonesia who were actually severely punished under Islamic rule for their non-conformity to gender I think in the late 90s.
This is learning for me too. So this is why I love this sort of stuff. I will genuinely now today. I will go away and have a read and expand my knowledge. Okay, so we're doing well here. We're not doing well here, but we're doing well.
We're definitely not doing well.
Okay, so another pop culture one. Which US TV series showed the first lesbian kiss?
Was it the Ellen Show?
No. It was LA Law. LA Law in the 80s. It was CJ and Abby had the first lesbian kiss broadcast on US terrestrial television. Okay,
I
here's one.
didn't
I'll go for one in your wheelhouse here.
go for it.
What connects the Greek symbol lambda with the LGBT community?
Oh no, I'm not talking to you. I've literally read about this recently, and now I've been put on the spot.
Ah,
Oh no, I don't want to be offensive to the culture by trying to guess. I can't believe this. I sat there and read this. It's to do.
I'll help you out. It was
Thank
the
you.
first symbol that was universally used as a representation of the community in times where symbols had to be so oblique that they wouldn't draw attention, they wouldn't cause problems for people if they were used. So it was like a secret symbol to signify the community.
There we are. I have to
Okay.
say, I'm not going to be showing my face in any archives anytime soon after
No,
this
no,
airs.
I think this is really important because this is great. You've got two people here who love history. And it's really important to know that loving history doesn't mean that you be pompous and suggest you know everything. How
No.
do I know this stuff? I know this stuff because I read about it. And actually, by the time I got to the 50th of these, I was trawling the internet and my library for information. Okay, who was the first openly out gay British MP?
It's literally in my training. It's Chris something.
It is Chris something.
Ah, oh no. And
It's like the
it's,
easiest surname to guess if you were just
I
going to guess
know.
a vanilla
I was going to
surname.
shout Smith, but
You should have shouted Smith. It's Chris Smith. Chris Smith,
ah,
1984. What was the first country to prohibit discrimination on grounds of sexuality in its constitution of 1996? First country in the world.
Oh no, France is the first to decriminalize, right? It was, or not decriminalize, but something along those lines. I'm gonna go with either Denmark or Norway.
No, it was South Africa.
Really?
South Africa, the first country to put it in its constitution as part of the rebirth of the nation after apartheid.
Oh, fascinating.
So great parallel there with big civil rights struggles where people saw whole communities being victimized, demonized, and killed, quite frankly, where the framers said we don't want that to happen again, and we don't want it to happen for any reason for anyone. So it just goes to show there's that intersectionality there. So after that, I wasn't actually keeping score. I think you did okay. I mean,
One.
we had fun. We had fun. Oh, you've got a couple. You've got a couple.
It's not the winning that matters.
You've been a lovely contestant, and nobody walks away with nothing here. Keep out of the black and into the red. There's nothing here for two in a bed.
And my carnation's on the wave, right? What a fantastic host! Please, everyone, give Priscilla Black a round of applause.
That's been massive fun, Oscar, and we need to do a few more of these. And look, history, kids' history is fun. History is interesting. History doesn't have to mean a dust fetish. It really is about learning some really fascinating stuff. And who I didn't know before this call started that there was a drunk fella putting bodies together, making trans people, and that has made my day. I don't drink myself, but I might start this afternoon.
Please don't.
Just in honor of the person who put us together and made us live. Any last thoughts you want to share with our lovely audience, Oscar, before we sign off?
Yeah, I think for me it's about remembering that if you are into history, it's supposed to be a bit of fun to an extent. Like, you can learn so much about our community. It can build your connection with the community, which can help you to feel more part of us. But actually, it should be fun. And I think that's something that we both take away from this, is that we don't know everything. No one is ever going to know everything. But actually, you can really scratch the right part of your brain if you enjoy history, and I think that should be what people take from this conversation more than anything. Is just that it's okay not to know it, but if you want to learn, you just should, and kind of ignore those almost elitist voices that say you have to know everything, because that's a total lie, and there's way
It
too
is.
much to know.
Medical safety note: don't scratch your brain, kids. So I'll leave you with one thought: is that history is not just about what happened before. History is being made today. If you look around you, you will see history makers all around you, and every one of us has a chance to be a history maker by standing up, by doing the right thing, and making your voice heard, because that voice will echo through the years. Thanks very much, Oscar.
Thank
And
you.
let's do another one of these sometime soon.
I'd love to.